You know, as a father of four and have pastored for over 20 years, this question about Halloween, should we participate? Should Christians get involved with Halloween or should they stay home? Is it evil? Is it wicked? Are you a bad Christian for celebrating Halloween and taking your kids out in the streets and getting candy? This is a big controversial thing. Now, of course, there are those who say any involvement in Halloween is opening the door to Satan, while other Christian parents believe that knocking on doors with their kids in the neighborhood is just, good family fun. So which is it? Are Christians bad for celebrating Halloween, or is it okay to celebrate Halloween? So let me get into that, the difference between celebrate and participate. If a Christian family allows their children to dress up and knock on doors and even say, trick or treat, smell my feet, give me something good to eat, I think it's safe to assume that that Christian family isn't celebrating the dark side of Halloween. But in this discussion, I do want to go back and look at some history, because I think with history it brings some context. So we have to go back to the Celtic Celebration. Now, if you recall, thousands of years ago, it was the Celtics, which is now Ireland, United Kingdom, and parts of France, who celebrated the new year on November 1st. Now, the night before, what they celebrated was Sow-in. It was known as the Lord of Death. You see, what they believed back then was that these spirits of the dead, they would return to earth. The people would leave gifts at the door, examples like wine, they would leave bread and different crops, and they did this to try to keep the dead spirits at bay. Another thing that was interesting was when they would go out in public, they would wear costumes. They did this so that the evil spirits would not be able to recognize them. The Druids would make bonfires, dress up in animal costumes, and offer sacrifices to deities, channeling supernatural powers to protect their crops and bless their future. Now, many of the Druids, they believed the end of summer and the coming of winter represented the actual clash of the spirits on the earth. And eventually, in time, the Romans came into power and they started to implement their own traditions. So now let's look at the Catholic celebration when it comes to Halloween. For hundreds of years, the Celts, the Druids, and the Romans all practiced their dark fall traditions until the Roman Catholic Church sought to counter these paganistic festivals with their own. By the turn of the 8th century, the Roman Catholic Church supplanted their own sanctioned holidays, known as All Saints' Day, remembering the heavenly saints, on November 1st, and All Souls' Day, a commemoration of the dead, on November 2nd. Now, on these days, what the Catholics would do is they would celebrate with their own bonfires, with their own feasts, and they would even dress up in different outfits of different spirits representing the spiritual warfare. Now, eventually on October 31st, the Christians came in and they started to celebrate what they call the Eve of All Hallows. That's where we get our name Halloween. It was a way for them to come together prior to November 1st and November 2nd. And it was a way of them celebrating God's protection over them. Often what Christians would do is they would dress up in different costumes, some of them representing good angels, some of them representing bad angels, and they would perform these plays and they would represent the spiritual battle between good and evil. Now we fast forward to America a few hundred years later, and what the early colonies did when they were emerging, they would have their own fall festivals and they would celebrate the time of the harvest. By the 19th century, a large wave of Irish and Scottish immigrants came to America during that potato famine of 1846. Now, with this big migration of Irish people, what they brought with them was their Halloween traditions. And they started to show different Americans these different traditions of Halloween, and the Americans started to like it. And so by the 1950s, Halloween became a national holiday. It was more about getting families together, having some neighborly fun, doing some pranks, and passing out and eating a lot of candy. So given all the history and what we've discussed so far, let's bring it back to context. Now, there are certainly those who still celebrate Halloween by commemorating its paganistic origins and traditions, while there are others who celebrate Halloween with religious ceremonies by remembering the dead. But for the most part, there are many Americans and even many Christians. They don't have a clue about the ancient origins of Samhain and the origination of All Hallows' Eve from the Catholic Church. Most Americans participate in Halloween activities because it's fun. Through the years, my wife and I have done different things. We have met other families for ice cream and donuts, stayed home passing out candy while the kids watched movies and ate popcorn and tons of candy. Other times, we went to a fall festival event at church. Some years, we did decide to walk the streets with our kids knocking on neighbors' doors. But no matter what my wife and I have done with our kids on Halloween, we've always tried to put things in proper perspective for our children. So let me share with you a few of these tips in closing. The first thing is, there are many people who love to display horrific images on Halloween and seek to strike fear into children. I think we're all in agreement with that. Number 2, Halloween is celebrated by Wiccans and considered by many to be a high holy day. Number 3, Halloween does attract a lot of crazy people. So if you do decide to go trick-or-treating, make sure that you do so as a family or you have a close network of people to keep them safe. Number 4, another thing that we've had discussion with our kids is that we have to make sure that the costumes, if in fact they wear them, are appropriate. And 5th and finally, in this time, because it's a fun time for a lot of family and friends, we have found through the years that it's a great opportunity to get to know our neighbors. It's a great reminder, yes, that there are spiritual battles out there and we have to be discerning. The Bible tells us in 1 John 4:1 to test the spirits as to whether they're of God, whether they're of the truth. And so make sure that when you're in these situations that you are light, that you are salt. So whatever you do, my friends, on Halloween, if you stay indoors or you go outside, I pray that you be safe, and I pray that God will continue to use you, and whatever you do, it will honor Him.